Hi, everybody. I have finished reading everybody's logs. No, excuse me, everybody's discussion board. And I'm getting through the logs. It'll probably take me, today's what, Saturday? Probably take me Saturday and Sunday because there's like 55 of them. And I like to do a good job, so I don't want to read all 55 at one time. I'll get tired. And then I don't do a good job. So let's get started on what I want to say for this week. First of all, I noticed on the discussion boards that I think some of you are taking the 10 points for granted. It's like, okay, I'll write anything down and won't have to say a whole lot, and then I'll get the 10 points. It's not that way. First of all, when you write your response, I'm looking that you have made a good attempt on it. Some of you didn't write good pie paragraphs this week. It was okay, as long as you attempted to. Okay, if you attempted to, you got 5 points. Now, where my evaluation comes in is how well did you do this part? And this is kind of an abbreviated version of what I asked you to do, but I asked you to read 1 to 5 of your classmates' posts and comment if the writer found the point of the story and if the story supports the point. Some of you didn't tell me that. You just said, oh yeah, that's a good story. I almost used it too. That's not what I was asking for. So please, please be sure that you are actually reading what I'm asking for. Also, minimum of 2 responses means you can't get over a C. So if you didn't do a good job with the 2, you might end up with getting 1 points or no points for the responses. You can make up to 5 posts. Just because you make 5 posts doesn't mean you're going to get all the points, okay? Now, 250 words isn't 250 words total for 2 or 5 responses. It's 250 words for each. Now, I'm not going to count them. But I want you to be, and some people are able to be very precise in about 100 words. So I don't want you filling up space, but make sure that you're telling the classmate something that they can use to revise the paragraph. The discussion board is your practice for when we write papers. And right now we're practicing paragraphs that would support a thesis. Now each paragraph has a point, and eventually we'll have paragraphs that will support the thesis, which is the overriding point. We'll get more into that lately. But right now I want you to practice these pie paragraphs so that you get really good at them, so when we write the paper, they're not like a shock. Now, if you respond on the discussion board, but you don't reply, you're going to get a failing grade because you're going to get 5 points for responding, but nothing for replying. If you do that for all 13 or 14 discussion boards, you're going to end up with an E on your or an F on your discussion boards. And that's a big part. Remember, there's like, I think there's 14 or, no, there's 13, I think, discussion boards. That's 130 points. So that's a lot of what's happening. Oh my gosh. Okay, here we go. Now, next week. Be sure if you've at least read Chapter 8. Some of you are behind in your reading, and that's going to be overwhelming toward the end when you have to have this whole thing read. So make sure you've read Chapter 8 and Chapter 3 in the Guild text. Remember, Chapter 3 in the Guild text, there will be a quiz over it. So on Wednesday, I'm talking about Chapter 3 or Chapter 8. Chapter 8 in the Vance text. Chapter 8 focuses on the unstable home that Vance's mother provided. I want you to draw a conclusion about that. Is how would you describe Vance's relationship with his mother or his relationships with his stepfather? You choose one or the other topic. I think with his mother it would be a little easier, but some people like a choice, so I put it there. Now, using the techniques in Chapter 3, and we've been this is the second time we've written a pie paragraph. Write one pie paragraph that relates to one of the prompts above. The first sentence is that conclusion. How would you describe Vance's relationships with his mother? Now think about that relationship with his mother and how it fits into hillbilly culture. For example, Vance's unstable relationship with his mother shows how drugs and alcohol can disrupt a hillbilly family. Okay, so that might be your conclusion you draw. And then the next sentences, and they're going to be, 3 or 4, you're going to use an illustration from the book that supports that conclusion, which is the P. And then the last sentence explains how this part, the illustration, proves the P. Now, this is the second time you've did it. If you had trouble last time, hopefully you've learned a little bit and you can do a little better this time. Now, be careful when you reply. Don't just tell them, oh, that's a good paragraph. What does that tell them if they have to revise it? Because eventually you're going to be looking at people's essays and you're going to be giving them advice on how to revise it. So you need to practice how to give advice. And if you're not giving good advice, it's going to hurt later on when you're asked to do a paper. And also it's going to hurt you if your classmates aren't giving good advice, because you're going to get, oh, that was good. Well, how do you revise something when you've been told it's good? How do you revise something if you've been told, I really liked your first paragraph because it told about blah, 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 blah. Well, okay, but maybe there's a problem in that first paragraph you need to talk about. Now, right now, I'm talking about content more than I'm talking about surface errors, okay? So when you reply, did the paragraph have a strong P? If not, how could it be improved? And also, why was it good? If the paragraph didn't have enough detail about the illustrations or didn't have an illustration, make some suggestions, explain why, and then did the paragraph explain how the illustration proved the P, and then make suggestions. In other words, how well did the paragraph make its points? And make sure that you're specific, okay? Remember, as I said earlier, you do a really good attempt on the first part, you're going to get all the points. You answer all these questions and you do it in detail, then you'll get the point. You can't just say, oh, I really enjoyed reading your paragraph. That doesn't tell your reader anything, or your writer anything. Okay. P paragraphs, pi paragraphs. And you saw, I would suggest you go back and see that video that I gave last week. In fact, I'll stick it back in this week's assignment too. Your point is that main idea of the paragraph. Maybe when you wrote paragraphs before in a writing class, they talked about the main idea of the paragraph. Well, that's the point. What is it that you want your readers to know? And this point's going to draw a conclusion. You're not going to just say that Vance's mom was a bad mom. Well, what does that tell us about the point of the book? Everything you should be thinking about should relate to what's the point in the book that Vance is trying to say. So you draw that conclusion. That's your point. Your illustrations, and notice your point is the smallest part of the paragraph. It's usually one sentence. That's why I'm showing you this illustration from the book. Look how much the evidence should be. It should be half your paragraph. It's the things from the book that show your idea, show your point. And then notice your explanations are longer than your point. You have to explain how the illustration showed the point. You can't just say, like I said, Vance's mother shows how drugs and alcohol affect the hillbilly culture. Okay. Then I got to give illustrations. How she went from man to man, how she tried to kill her son. Okay, maybe one more evidence I can't come up with right now. And then I need to explain that. Showing, and you might put an explanation after each example rather than at the end. But how do all these things you talked about show that Vance's mother, hillbilly culture, was affected by drugs and alcohol? Okay. Next, logs. Okay, I've only read through a few of them. But what I'd like to see you doing, and I've been telling you this on the logs if this applies to you, begin relating quotes to the values that Vance feels are part of the hillbilly culture. You might want to sit down this week before your reading and write down what values does the hillbilly culture have that you have drawn that conclusion from the reading so far. You should be through at least chapter 7. In chapter 7, that was the 1 to 7 quiz last week. Think about what are the values he's showing us and that he's setting us up for. What are these values that are part of hillbilly culture? And then what values are the stories illustrating? Notice this is almost the P. This is the first part's the P, the second part's the I, and then you just need evidence or explanations, excuse me. Now, eventually you're going to have to ask the question, how, and some of you are in your logs when you're asking questions, how does Vance overcome being part of the hillbilly culture when he has these values? Think about that. How does Vance overcome the hillbilly culture when he has these values? And that's what later on in the book we're going to be looking at. Finally, a study tip. And I'm putting this here right now because I said before you read this time the Vance book, write down what the values are. Because writing something out is equivalent to reading it 7 times. It has to do with brain theory. It has to do with the fact that you're thinking. It has to do with the fact that you're trying to compose your thoughts into complete sentences. And all those things, the fact you're moving your pen, and I don't mean type it out. I mean take a pen, take a study pad, and write it down, okay? When you write something out, you're going to remember it more. So it's a good idea to maybe write down these values rather than typing them before you begin your log. The other thing you might want to do is write out your log before you type it. You're going to remember the points in the book better, and you're going to need to know those points in the book when we start writing the papers. Okay? That's about it I have for this week. Please contact me on Remind if you have a question. Please contact me and I will get back to you as soon as I can. I do want to tell you that it's rare if I answer a Remind text after about 5 or 6. So if you're asking me at the last minute about an assignment, you may not get that answer. But please, use it. You will hear back from me. And I am always willing to answer questions. And please don't write, "I'm sorry to bother you." You're not bothering me, okay? That's what I'm here for. Have a good week.